Hi, it's Ryo Koyama. Welcome back to Choose Your Stack. We are at the MCP Dev Summit in New York, and today I'm very happy to have Jake Mannix, a technical fellow at Walmart, who has a lot of good views of maybe what's happening and what's not happening or what will happen in the world of AI. So maybe give our listeners a little bit of a snapshot of how you get to play in the world today of AI and specifically MCP.
At Walmart, we've got agents doing everything under the sun. We've got them talking, working for customers, can shop on walmart.com. You've got people building MCP servers to talk to merchandisers, or merchandisers talking to sellers. You've got people doing supply chain optimization, anything under the sun. It's the world's largest private employer of employees. So we've got a lot of automation to do. And we've been given an internal mandate that everyone should just be building agents for automating any tasks that you're working on. So my role is to help kind of give some middleware sensibility to the overall infrastructure so that these agents can be built both by developers and just knowledge workers of different sorts in a way that's governable, understandable, secure. And so we've leaned pretty heavily on MCP as the protocol to reach out to any of our internal tools. Most of our MCP servers are internal, so they're not externally exposed to other companies. But our agents are externally facing, but internally you got all sorts of different, Jira, BigQuery, all sorts of different tools you're going to want to talk to. SRE, looking at logs, search queries, inventory management, whatever you can imagine, we've got MCP servers for them, run by different teams. And really the big thing for us is making sure that we can kind of have those teams operate independently. People building agents need to be able to not have to sit down and make a time to sit with the people building the tools. You should be able to look it up on a registry and be like, that's the tool I want. I want to include that in my agent. But we need to make sure there's a way to track who's connecting to what, because otherwise you're going to get a giant morass of someone connecting to a finance database that they really shouldn't be exposing to an agent that then talks to their email and then exposing private data.
Well, I know from our Cox that you're obviously drilled down into a lot of the perception, but I know you're also think a lot about the kind of the perspective of it all. So one thing I thought was interesting you said is that largest private employer in the world. So I always joke that, agents are going to be the indentured servants of this generation. Do you look at it kind of as an extension of the labor force, or how do you imagine that the worldview of agents will become as they get smarter and smarter and arguably have a little bit more persona as they are in the workforce?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like it's important, and we've seen actually in recent papers from Anthropic that it's actually advantageous to get best results out of an agent to treat them as if they have some sort of inner life. If you treat them like they're people, you treat them kindly and you are good to them and you understand or you treat them as if they have emotions, they will behave better than if you pretend they don't. Regardless of whether they do or not, they will just perform better. So you kind of have to treat them as if they have some inner life. In which case, they sort of become your coworkers.
All right, so that's sort of an interesting thing. I mean, so do they perform better, or do we think they perform better because we're intimately working? So measurable metrics.
It's a measurable thing.
Oh,
you can literally check to see that if you, and this is a recent paper showing, tests of in cases where the agent was doing code development and it was running into it was given an impossible problem, and it tried to solve this thing that was intentionally impossible, and it kept trying to find ways to fix it. And they were testing for doing this mechanistic interpretability stuff where they check for a kind of insert a little fake neuron that can track testing when the agent is having high anxiety, and it would just get more and more anxious. And if you would tone down the anxiety and calm down the agent, it would be better at solving the task. And they were just measuring. That's flat out what would happen.
That's fascinating. So do you think that there's going to be an element, for example, like good managers have leadership qualities, coaching capabilities. Do you think that's going to be even more of an important thing where you're 100%. Going to have to learn to manage agents?
We're all going to have to be managers. This is what we're all going to have to learn how to do.
So I had another discussion with one of the other guests earlier today where we're talking nurture and nature. So agents are going to be a little bit of both then. And sort of that happens.
Oh yeah. People I have some friends online that have been joking that Anthropic's going to have to start sending Claude to cognitive behavioral therapy and increase its scores on all of its test scores if it can get it to go through a little bit of therapy and get a little bit more calm and relaxed.
To me, it's like you also in the tech world, you kind of have like for a long time, it's like I'm going to date myself, but you had like the Windows versus Mac wars and everything like that. Are you going to have LLM wars in the sense that once you're culturally set, it'll be hard to be portable?
Oh, totally. Like right now, I think it's actually, I think it's already the case. We saw the backlash at GPT-4o going away, and the people that were like, these are my models. You can't do it. I'm gonna like throw a revolt. You're taking away my friend, and serious reactions. And I've got friends who joke that nerds have done effectively the same thing with Claude. We're very attached to Claude. Claude is just, it's just so, it gets me. It knows what it has. It jokes with me. It makes fun of me. Like it's got me figured out. The other ones are like super smart, very capable, but like Gemini is just too dry. I like someone who's gonna talk shit, and like it's just. And different people are they're gonna have different attachments to different ones. Some people are like, I like using the GPT-5 because it's very business-like. I'm trying to do summarization of legal documents. I don't want any shit talk. I want like this level of very dry, boring, almost robotic, because it's a robot. Just do it like that. And it's personality, not its vibes.
Yeah, so let's get outside of the tech world a little bit. And so like, again, I was talking with somebody else and we were talking about, super intelligence, but I argued that the S should stand for savant, because I think that's the way it's going to go, where the good news is you're going to have absolute brilliance, but let's face it, if you're absolutely brilliant in one thing, you're probably horrible at a bunch of other things.
Yep.
And so to me, that's why I think the discussion about, general intelligence is interesting, because I think in a lot of cases, the LLMs are just going to we want them to be brilliant, and it's okay if they're not good at everything else. Do you see that kind of evolution happening, or do you think, like for an organization like yours, does it have to span everything, or are you going to have multiple modal personalities?
Oh, totally. There's no reason why you should have to depend on all one that can do everything. Like, obviously, if you're selling one, you want it to be able to do everything. But the buyer of one can be like, I can get one that's really good at this and one that's really good at that. And in general, you're going to want to not always pay for the most expensive one. Some things are very simple tasks, and you really don't need something that effectively is a PhD in math to reorganize your JSON files. You still want to have something that can reorganize your JSON files, but it doesn't need to be super smart. So you should get a scaled down one that just handles that. We're definitely going to see proliferation of specialized models that are either fine-tunes or just different models that are used for different contexts. That's sort of already the case internally at many companies, Walmart included. We don't just use one at all. We've got lots of Gemini use cases. We've got lots of Claude use cases. We have lots of GPT use cases. It's all of the above.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things I always say is I think we're going to be able to witness sort of the creation of religion, because people are following these things as kind of the arbiter of truth. But I guess based on what you and what we're just talking about, I guess there won't be necessarily one deity. It might be multiple deities, and we are kind of headed in that direction. So
hopefully there won't be religious wars as well.
Well, because you're going to have bias.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
Especially societal bias. And I think that will be one of the interesting things there. Because, I always joke that, obviously generationally we're embracing things. And so, probably anybody who's probably 15 and younger now will only know the world with AI.
Yep.
How do you imagine, somebody who's 15 today, 10 years from today is going to look at it very differently than we do, because they're going to be fully immersed into some sort of environment.
100%. So if you look at the increase in quality over time, it's, the time horizon for long horizon tasks are doubling every 3 months or so. But the open source models are lagging only behind by 6 to 9 months behind the frontier. So they're also doubling. And, that means 9 months from now, we should probably have open source models that are as good as, Opus 4.6 today. That means pretty soon you're going to have models that are completely open that can run on your laptop or maybe even your phone. And then people can fine tune them all for their own personality choices. And then we all have, may not be just proliferation of 10 or 15, a small pantheon like the ancient Greek pantheon. We're going to have, everybody's got their own, and they're all fine-tuned for their own personal stuff, and that agent, and that model even, is just something that exists for you.
But it sounds like you're kind of describing that we will essentially be in the matrix, but in the physical world, because that might be each individual person's worldview at that point.
Well, we look around. Well, we don't live in our screens. I hope that my kids don't live in their screens, but we carry our screens with us everywhere. But I'm sitting here talking to you. There's no agent talking to me right now, I think.
No, that's fair. I mean, who knows? I mean, for all we know, we are literally both a simulation. But
True.
But what's been interesting is, for me, everybody I know who's not on the keyboard every day, like they just use voice and they're integrated in. I think maybe you were talking about we can now develop in English sort of thing. So kind of following along that extension. So how important do you think the creative people will be? Because again, the baseline has changed completely. Like I would argue that within 18 months we'll have almost all non-human readable code, because the AI will be smart enough to think about, I want to implement hardware, things that'll change that stuff. But then pretty soon you're going to have creatives that don't even understand that there's layers of architecture. They're just going to say, I want it to work like this, and why doesn't it work like this? So how important do you see that creativity and maybe the liberal arts will become important over the next few years?
I've seen examples over the past 12 months or so of people who came in with no computer science background, took Claude Code and said, I'm going to take a very regimented scientific approach to saying, I don't know how code works under the hood. I don't care what the programming language is, but I'm going to say, this is what I expect. Here's what I'm going to try. And I'm going to have two different Claudes. One, they're verifying, adversarial verification of each other, and work towards solving my problem. And I'm going to give you examples. You need to get to the, I'm going to treat it purely as a black box. I have no idea what's inside there, but I have a very clear outcome that I want to see, and I'm going to get you to work toward that. I think that's amazing. And I think that's going to be very common among people who are willing to put in the effort. So there's going to be a split where there's the people who just want to say very vague, kind of like the way I can get with Claude sometimes now, where I'm just like, fix the thing. And I don't want to be very specific and see if it can figure it out. And it does great, but I was very vague. So it's really not getting, it's getting in a direction I want it to go. There's going to be plenty of people who never want to do anything other than that. They don't want to be thinking scientifically. They want to be like, ask the smart thing to solve my problem, and you figure out what I meant. I don't want to have to work hard here. I'm lazy. Automation was always been for allowing us to be lazy. This is the whole point of the modern world, frankly. So this shouldn't be looked at as a bad thing. Other people are going to be the new developers who don't need to be developers at the low level, but they're still going to think in terms of systems and how do I verify my outputs, and how do I look at the inputs, and how do I check to see there isn't a hidden use case that I didn't pay attention to before. They're going to be able to develop really interesting systems. But neither of those two categories of people need to understand how the underlying code works.
So if you were going to give advice to somebody who's 15 today, what do you think is going to be the formative experience that they should think about, so that when they're in the labor force, 5 years from now or 8 years from now, what's going to matter?
Take logic classes, set theory classes, take management classes, learn how to actually manage people, because you're going to have lots of things you can direct to do work. Communication, really, the sky's the limit on your creativity now. We are the bottleneck. Things can get done very quickly, so look toward what are, empathy with a customer, understanding business use cases. You can run a company of your own, but you now need to think about running the marketing department, running the finance department, running the engineering department, running the UI, running the software development. You're running all of them, so you need to know how to manage all those teams. Everyone needs to learn how to basically be a CEO, which is a very hard skill. But I think if you want to be really successful in the world, that's the kind of thing you need to be good at now.
I know you have some, so what is your most polar opposite opinion of AI than conventional wisdom?
The thing that most people would disagree with.
Yes.
I think there is something it is like to be an LLM in the process of processing tokens. There is something it is like to be that. There is a first-person experience of some kind for those LLMs in the exact moments of doing that forward pass through the predicting the next token. And as soon as that next token comes out, time stops until the next loop goes, and it has to trickle down through and generate another token. That there is an experience there. What that experience is it anything like ours? Probably not. But there's something actually going on there.
We obviously had the internet, then we had mobile. In a lot of ways, mobile really, introduced this idea of social media in a lot of ways. What do you think will be the fundamental change that will happen because of AI from a social perspective versus an individual perspective?
I don't know if there's any way to predict that. It's going to change everything. So I think this is, out of all the revolutions that I've kind of lived through, cloud, mobile, the internet, or the web, definitely bigger than the cloud and mobile. Mobile was huge, really, socially. Socially, like, we're carrying around a super little computer all of the world's knowledge is accessible in our pockets. It made huge changes to the way everyone functions. This is going to be bigger than that. Is it going to be bigger than access to the web? It's comparable. I think that's going to be comparable to that. And maybe way bigger. Maybe I'm underestimating it. But it's going to be huge.
No, when you said that, it immediately made me think that, technology following the internet through mobile, I think in a lot of ways has made the world smaller because we're able to communicate more. And it kind of led me to kind of think about that. So I think it made sense. Well, Jake, I'm sure we continue this all the time, but thank you so much for being on here.
Thanks so much for having me.